In our headlines on this Monday afternoon, April 10th here in South Korea. The U.S. Defense Department has made a formal referral to the U.S. Justice Department for investigation into the unauthorized disclosure of classified documents detailing the efforts against Russia's war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, speculation mounts over the Bank of Korea's future rate policy as inflation shows signs of slowing but also spreading to other sectors here on the local front. And Korea's tax revenue plunges to a fresh low during the first 2 months of this year, fanning fears that the government may soon loosen its grip on fuel taxes to account for the growing deficit. U.S. authorities are investigating the unauthorized online disclosure of alleged classified military documents sharing sensitive information about Russia's war in Ukraine and about its allies, including South Korea. Our Son Heung-min has the latest.
Regarding the dozens of highly classified, recently leaked military documents, the U.S. says it's reviewing the matter. That's according to the Pentagon on Sunday in a written interview with South Korea's Yonhap news agency. The department said it was looking into the leak and that it has asked the Justice Department to launch an investigation. Last Friday, a new batch of photos of wrinkled documents apparently originating from the Pentagon was shared online. They revealed information seemingly obtained by U.S. spy agencies on a wide range of matters, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine and also info on key allies like South Korea and Israel, which could hurt diplomatic ties. Citing the leaked documents, the New York Times detailed a conversation between then-President Yoon Suk-yeol's Secretary for Foreign Affairs and his national security advisor that the government was, quote, mirroring concerns that the U.S. would not be the end user if South Korea were to comply with a U.S. request for ammunition. In February, the U.S. had reportedly inquired about purchasing ammunition from South Korea, but the administration was worried about supplies reaching Ukraine and going against its long-standing policy of not supplying weapons to countries at war. The Times noted that details of the discussion between top advisors of South Korea's president were based on signals intelligence, a term used by spy agencies to describe intercepted communications from phone calls to electronic messages. The papers also contain plans by Russian mercenaries, the Wagner Group, to operate in Africa and how the Israeli Foreign Intelligence Agency Mossad had encouraged its staff and members of the public to participate in the anti-government protests that took place across the country in March. According to CNN, U.S. officials say the documents are real. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
North Korea has remained unresponsive to routine calls with South Korea for the fourth day in a row. Accordingly, Seoul believes Pyongyang has unilaterally cut off communication. And in response, the Unification Ministry here on Monday spoke of monitoring the situation closely. Earlier on Friday, the ministry confirmed that it had failed to get a response on an inter-Korean liaison channel and a military hotline, both of which are normally used twice a day. The ministry adds this is the first time that calls have stopped for longer than a day since communications were restored in October 2021. Prior to that period, North Korea had cut off the cross-border communication in light of the Seoul-Washington joint military drills. Earlier on this Monday, the remains of Korean independence activist Hwang Ki-hwan landed in South Korea from the U.S. 100 years after his death. According to Seoul's Ministry of Patriots and Veterans Affairs, Hwang was buried in New York in 1923 after surrendering to heart disease at the age of 37. He moved to the U.S. in 1904 and volunteered to fight as an American soldier on the Western Front in Europe during World War I. After the war, Hwang became a diplomat for the Korean provisional government dedicated to seeking independence from Japanese colonial rule and to raising awareness of Japanese atrocities in Korea. His story was the basis of the Korean drama Mr. Sunshine, which was released back in the year 2018. In other news, the government and ruling party have decided to mediate over a proposed nursing bill that has pit the nation's nurses and doctors against each other. During a meeting on Sunday, relevant officials and lawmakers of the People Power Party agreed to come up with a middle ground proposal over the possible legislation of the Nursing Act. The act aims to improve working conditions for nurses by outlining the roles and duties of licensed nurses separately from the current Medical Service Act, which puts them under the guidance of physicians. The act is backed by the opposition Democratic Party of Korea, but opposed by doctors' groups. Come tomorrow, that is Tuesday, Seoul's central bank will share its latest decision on its interest rate as pundits make note of Korea's slowing but nonetheless spreading inflation. My colleague Lee Kyung-hun reports.
Inflation in South Korea remains stubborn, but appears to be slowing, coming at 4.2% in March, the smallest on-year jump in a year.
Consumer prices have been seemingly cooling down since the second half of last year and are likely to stabilize further throughout this year.
That's raising some anticipation of an interest rate freeze when the Bank of Korea makes its decision on Tuesday.
The US may slow down rate hikes as the labour market stabilises. That's easing pressure on the BOK in terms of the exchange rate, and perhaps means it will make its rate decision based on the domestic situation.
However, with the recent announcement by OPEC Plus to cut production, oil prices are seemingly rebounding, possibly affecting prices in general. And even with that oil prices potentially surging, items are getting more expensive across the board. The price pressures, which initially began with fuel and food, have been seen in 86% of 458 items last month, most notably in the service sector, where restaurant prices jumped 7.4% in March, a significantly high number compared to the overall inflation of 4.2% in that month. With this, core inflation, which excludes the price changes in the volatile food and energy sectors, remained relatively heated at 4.8%. Against the backdrop of these mixed inflation figures, eyes are on the Bank of Korea's upcoming decision. Lee Kyung-hun, Arirang News.
Tax revenue tumbled during the first 2 months of this year, triggering speculation that the government may ease its cap on fuel taxes. Our economics correspondent Shin Ha-young reports.
South Korea's tax revenue may fall short of its estimate this year. That's according to Finance Minister Chu Kyung-woo on Friday, amid rising concern over tax revenue, as South Korea recorded its greatest ever on-year decline earlier this year. The Ministry of Economy and Finance had already released data on the country's tax revenue for the first 2 months of 2023, which came to around 54 trillion Korean won, or $41 billion, roughly $12 billion less than in the same period last year. Initially, the government forecast a total of roughly $300 billion for 2023. However, even if the government collects the same amount of tax as last year from March until the end of the year, the deficit will surpass $15 billion. And if the trend continues, tax revenue for 2023 will see an on-year decrease for the first time since 2019. And amid the growing concern, the government is reportedly reviewing a plan to gradually remove fuel tax discounts. With oil prices hitting record highs around the world last year, South Korea has been offering a temporary concession on fuel to ease the burden on drivers. From the first day of 2023, the tax cut on gasoline was reduced to 25% from 37%, while the rate for diesel has been set at 37% since last year. With that rate set to expire at the end of this month, the government must decide soon whether or not to extend the discounts. Among potential options is reducing the tax cut for diesel to the same level as gasoline, or cutting the rate for both gasoline and diesel to the 15 to 20% range. Apart from fuel tax, adjusting the tax cut applied to car purchases has been also mentioned as a way to secure and stabilize tax revenue. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Tottenham Hotspur forward Son Heung-min scored his 100th English Premier League goal on Saturday, becoming the first Asian player in the league to hit this milestone. It came during Saturday's 2-1 win over Brighton and Hove Albion at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium in London. It was his 7th league goal of the season and 11th in all competitions. The Spurs are sitting in 5th place in the league, one spot shy of a Champions League qualification position with 8 games to play. Son joined Tottenham in 2015 and has played for his club a total of 260 times. On the international front, tensions are high on the Taiwan Strait as China responds aggressively to last week's high-profile visit to the U.S. by Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen. Our i-SMR explains.
Following Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen's visit to the U.S., where she held talks with U.S. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, China began 3 days of military drills around Taiwan on Saturday. According to the Taiwanese Armed Forces on Sunday, it spotted 70 Chinese aircraft, including Su-30 fighters and H-6 bombers, as well as 11 ships around the island. A simulated precision strike drill was conducted against key targets in those areas. In response, Taiwan deployed several fighter jets, as well as the Coast Guard, ramping up its full military readiness. It's been also reported that the U.S. deployed its Boeing P-8 Poseidon, an American maritime patrol and reconnaissance aircraft, capable of detecting military activity in the Taiwan Air Defense Identification Zone. Washington had already warned Beijing against overreacting to the recent visit by President Tsai to the U.S., adding that it would closely watch China's actions. Taiwan's defense ministry accused China of intentionally creating tension in the Taiwan Strait while negatively affecting international security and economic development. Despite this, China has made it clear that it will continue to ramp up pressure on Taiwan as it's set to continue its military drill on Monday using live ammunition. Watchers say the latest response from Beijing will most certainly raise tensions not only between China and Taiwan, but with the U.S. as well. i-SMR, Arirang News.
And back here in Korea, the government is expanding its investment into innovative small modular reactors given their safety and convenience. Our Chung Won-ju has details.
The i-SMR, or Innovative Small Modular Reactor, is 1,000 times safer than current nuclear power plants. South Korea's i-SMR business has been recently put into motion. The South Korean government has decided to inject 1.2 trillion won, or roughly $900 million into this year's budget for energy technology development such as SMRs. One of their major benefits is that they're safe to install in city centers and residents wouldn't need to evacuate if there was an accident.
The SMR is a combination of many safety improvement technologies that have been studied so far. The probability of a major accident to occur is once in a billion years.
With an electric output of 170 megawatts electrical and a size less than 1 to 100 of current nuclear power plants, the i-SMR could replace thermal power plants fueled by coal at a cheaper price and with shorter construction periods. Another advantage of the i-SMR is that it can stably and cheaply produce hydrogen.
I think that we should accelerate the development of hydrogen and nuclear power plants, especially SMR technology.
Both the ruling and opposition parties in South Korea guaranteed the safety of SMRs and agreed to help advance it into the export market by 2030.
Rather than saying nuclear power plants are dangerous so they're unnecessary, we should try to reduce their risk factors so that people can accept their use.
I have the know-how for the predecessor of smart nuclear power plants, and though it's an ambitious plan, I think it's possible to achieve.
Roughly 80 kinds of SMRs are being developed globally, and South Korea secured the original technology for the first time in the world in 2012. The market for alternatives to coal power is expected to grow to more than 100 trillion won annually after the 2030s. With South Korea's investment in i-SMRs, the race to develop them has already begun. Chung Won-ju, Arirang News.
Authorities are proposing the hammering out of smart buildings that better accommodate the productive use of robots. Our HeungMin has more on this proposal.
While robots are already being used in many parts of the country to make life easier, many limitations still restrict their use. Most are either cleaning, carrying food to customers, or disinfecting as it wanders around. While these are all helpful features, experts in Korea believe they can do more. That's why the nation's land ministry has come up with the idea of smart buildings that are designed so that robots can be used to their fullest.
When a building becomes smart, the robots will bring a package from outside to right in front of the office or even into the room. It's an idea that makes things a lot more convenient.
The ministry also predicted that the technology would provide a setting where robots can disinfect areas and take care of elders.
When seniors need a wheelchair or rescue robots with handles and wheels, they aren't just for use at home. They need to use them outdoors too, and even in different buildings.
They also suggested how urban air mobility will be applied to the smart building project. Urban air mobility, also known as UAM, is a next-generation traffic system either for traveling or transporting freight. The ministry said once the smart buildings are complete, they will set up UAM stations for easier transfers and a faster response system against any potential accidents. Experts from some 50 public and private organizations have taken part in launching the committee and said they are still working on the exact outline to put the project in place, as autonomous driving and UAM are some of the technologies that still require time to be fully commercialized. Son Heung-min, Arirang News.
What is lost in Seoul Metro is found in Seoul Metro. Now, this is a norm here in the capital city, much to the relief of those who unwittingly leave behind their possessions on subway trains or at subway stations. Our Kim Jung-shil has more on this reality and the abundant praise from foreign visitors.
This is a lost and found center for subway lines number 3 and 4 here in central Seoul. Some items get picked up quite quickly. Some have been here since last year. There's no name tag, no address, nothing to help find out who the owner is.
More than 500 to 600 items arrive every month here at Chungmuro Lost and Found Center. And some of the items here are quite unexpected, like this celadon, for example, was found at a women's bathroom inside the station last October and is still waiting to be picked up.
It's not just the celadon that's unusual. We asked the manager about some of the more surprising items she's found.
We get shocked when we get mannequin heads. Sometimes there are even false teeth for senior citizens.
There are also guitars, violins, and fire extinguishers. If no one claims these items after 6 months, they then get taken to social work institutes to be used for people in need. Recently, there's been a surge in foreigners who visit this center.
Recently, a Japanese tourist came to look for his watch. We had that watch at the center. We asked him if he has any photos of the watch, and he did, so we returned it to him.
More than 2,400 thank you letters were sent to Seoul Metro last year by people who had found their lost valuables. An exchange student from the Netherlands said she knows someone who had a lucky escape.
My friend lost her phone in the subway, and someone brought it to the lost and found, so she got her phone again. I think it was really a good thing, because I think back home in the Netherlands, that would not happen. Someone would have taken a phone.
Lost and found centers in South Korea upload daily findings online on the day that they arrive. Anyone missing their belongings can visit lost112.go.kr and see if their belongings are there. The Lost and Found Center manager said it really helps if passengers can remember the subway car number they've been traveling on, which is written on the platform floor. Kim Jung-shil, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the French city of Marseille, at least 8 people are missing after 2 buildings collapsed. The buildings came down after an explosion on Sunday morning local time, which authorities say was likely caused by a gas leak. The explosion also partly damaged a 3rd building nearby. 5 were injured in the collapse, and almost 200 people in the vicinity have been evacuated. Initial rescue efforts were hampered by dust and heat from the fire, which took hours to extinguish. Officials say that fatalities among those missing are likely. The disaster marks the 2nd time in 5 years that a building has collapsed in the port city. In November 2018, 8 people were killed when 2 houses collapsed due to structural issues. Turning to the French Alps now, where an avalanche on Sunday killed 4 people and injured 9. Search teams are looking for 2 people still missing. Among the dead were 2 mountain guides overseeing a group of people thought to be backcountry skiing at the time when the risk level was reasonable. The avalanche near Mont Blanc spanned an area of 1 kilometer by 500 meters. It started when a slab of snow fell from the top of a mountain. Officials have not ruled out the chance of a second avalanche. Meanwhile, golf legend Tiger Woods has withdrawn from this year's Masters over a foot injury. The 5-time Masters champion said on social media on Sunday, local time, that he is withdrawing due to pain in his heel. The injury is believed to be linked to a 2021 car crash that severely injured his right leg and required multiple surgeries. The 47-year-old had reached the 3rd round, making the cut for a record-equaling 23rd time. The Masters at Augusta National Golf Club in the U.S. state of Georgia has seen delays this year due to poor weather. Spain's John Ram won the tournament by 4 shots. And finally, animals at London Zoo joined in the Easter festivities as they were handed special Easter egg treats from their handlers last week. The animals were put on a traditional Easter egg hunt with eggs hidden in their enclosures. Zookeepers said it served as a way for the animals to practice their natural foraging behaviors normally done in the wild. Rare Sumatran tigers, meerkats and squirrel monkeys were among the animals taking part in the hunt. The eggs were made of cardboard and filled with treats ranging from moss and crickets to sweet potato, sweet corn and peas. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasant spring day nationwide with a few things to be mindful of. First, big temperature differences of more than 10 to 20 degrees Celsius across Korea. Daejeon is having white gaps today, feeling like going through 2 seasons in just a few hours. So it's a day for turning heaters on early in the morning, but then needing the AC for the afternoon. Meanwhile, East Coast regions Daegu and Busan are under dry weather advisory again. And making matters worse, wind is going to pick up in the East Coast regions and West Coast from the afternoon, with stronger wind in the forecast tomorrow. But for today, the nation is enjoying plenty of sunny skies with safe air quality levels all day long today. It's a good day to spend some time outdoors. Meanwhile, southern provinces are seeing highs above 20 degrees Celsius. Then rain is in the forecast for tomorrow, starting from the capital in the morning and spreading nationwide by the afternoon. Then one more round of rain is possible at the end of the week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That ends Monday's afternoon newscast, but do stay with us for our daily panel session coming up right after this break. Thank you for now.
I'm live! 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 이거 먹지 텐션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고
좋아요. Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world. Like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city. Transforming our world, navigating toward a better future. World Expo 2030, Busan, Korea.
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. You excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
춥지 않은가요? 처음 태어난 이별에서 사는 우리 손잡아요.
한번 2분.
South Korea's real estate market was addressed by the foreign media, as were its low fertility rate and North Korea's claim of another underwater nuclear drone test. So what concerns about South Korea's housing market were brought to light? What do foreign media believe is behind South Korea's record low fertility rate? And how credible are North Korea's claims about its successful underwater nuclear drone tests?
Welcome to Issues and Insiders. We start the work week today with a look at stories here on the Korean Peninsula that made headlines elsewhere as well. For this, I have Jaco Zwitslut here in the studio with us. Jaco, welcome back.
Thank you for having me again.
I also have Melanie Jensen with us. Melanie, it's good to see you again.
It's good to see you.
Right, Jacko, let's begin with some concerning outlook regarding Korea's housing market. Given its unique jeonse renting practice, how severe is the situation as shared by Bloomberg?
Yes, I should sketch a little bit of context first. There are three main ways to get a house in South Korea, and one of them is, of course, to buy it with a bank loan. Now, if you want a mortgage, you can only borrow up to about 40% of the apartment's value in the Seoul metropolitan area. And that means you have to put up 60% of it by yourself as a deposit, and that's out of reach for a lot of people. And so the second way is to get an apartment by paying a big deposit called jeonse to the apartment owner. And the jeonse is typically between 2/3 and 70% of the value of the apartment. And even that's a lot of money, as you can imagine. So people often take out a jeonse loan from a bank and use that and pay interest on that each month. So the owner then takes the jeonse deposit and uses that often to invest in something, sometimes even in the same piece of property that is being rented out, using a technique called gap investing. And so when a tenant leaves, the landlord has to quickly pay that jeonse money back, which can be difficult if that money's tied up in an investment. So the landlord is always hoping that they'll find another tenant to move in quickly enough to pay the jeonse to the outgoing tenant. The third way to get an apartment is to have a monthly rent, where you pay a smaller deposit and a monthly rent. Obviously, the bigger the deposit, the less rent you pay. So jeonse has traditionally been the most common way to rent an apartment in Korea if you're not buying. But last year, for the first time ever, monthly rental contracts actually exceeded the number of jeonse contracts. And that means that landlords could have a hard time finding a new incoming jeonse tenant to pay the outgoing jeonse tenant their money back, which could push owners to try to quickly sell those properties that are underperforming at a lower than expected price, and that could lead to a downward spiral in property prices overall. So Bloomberg quoted the Korea Research Institute for Human Settlements as saying that if jeonse prices fall by 10%, it could mean that 25% or 1/4 of property owners will have difficulty paying back those jeonse when a tenant moves out. And property prices already fell by 4.4% in February alone. So there is some concern there, and that would have knock-on effects on the construction industry more broadly, because the construction industry is funded by jeonse prices, is funded by short-term loans called project financing, and if they can't sell those houses, then they can't pay the project financing loans back. And in January, there were already 75,000 homes that were unsold. So there's a bit of concern, and people are watching that market very carefully to see what happens.
Right, we all are. And meanwhile, Melania, the high cost of housing here in the country was also cited as one obstacle to starting a family in an extensive coverage, I believe, by The Atlantic. Tell us a bit more about that coverage.
Yes, so it seems that because many people in South Korea are struggling economically, especially with finding a good house, and especially in Seoul, where the housing prices are so high, it can be a factor for motivating people to opt out of children. However, it's only one of the many factors that can be the reason why especially women choose not to get children. Another big factor is simply that women now, since they have more freedom in society, more economically freedom, more women are entering the job market, meaning that fewer women are actually interested in having children. This is a subject that is a worldwide problem, but it seems to be especially strong in Korea, which has caught the attention of a lot of foreign media, including my own. It is also related with the growing feminism wave in South Korea, where a lot of women simply decide that they will try to have as little to do as possible with men. And they do this by joining the so-called 4B movement. And the 4B movement is that women are opting out of dating, childbirth, sex with men, and marriage. And it can also include refusing to wear makeup and in general just choosing female products or products and companies driven by women more than men. And this is a very big factor of this raging, some will call it gender war, but at least a gender conflict that there is in Korea right now, where we have a growing feministic movement, but also a growing anti-feministic movement. government.
Right, and this is something you covered extensively as well, right, Melanie?
Yes.
Do you see this conflict like heating up further in the years to come?
I'm afraid so, and right now I don't think that the Korean government is doing its best to actually get this conflict down. One of the big problems right now is that the Yoon Suk-yeol government is discussing whether to close the gender ministry, which should be taking care of these kind of problems. So there is right now no future prospects where we will see that this conflict will get any better.
Right, I see. Moving on to the political front, Jaco, there was also an interesting piece by the Washington Post on what the U.S. could learn from democratic countries like South Korea about prosecuting former presidents. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, a Washington Post writer, Matthew Brown, who focuses on threats to democratic institutions, looked at the case of South Korea, Israel, Italy, France and Argentina as other democracies who have prosecuted former leaders. Now, having read the article closely a couple of times, it looks like they did a miscount. They only mentioned 3 South Korean presidents who went to jail and 1 who was prosecuted but didn't go to jail. And I think there was 4, by my count, that were actually prosecuted and went to jail. So they've done a bit of a miscount there. But still, the big take-home lesson from Korea is that prosecuting former presidents in South Korea has not had the effect of eroding democracy here. Korea is still a vibrant democratic society, and power regularly changes hands from one party to another party through democratic processes. Now, one analyst, Ji-young Ri-bom, a lecturer at the Harvard Kennedy School who researches East Asian democracies, he said that it may have been possible in the case of Park Geun-hye for politicians to cross party lines and vote for the impeachment because the political party system in Korea isn't as rigidly fixed as it is in the United States. He also said that having an impeachment go from the National Assembly on to the Constitutional Court could help to strengthen the legitimacy of the vote so that it's not seen as a purely political process. So the overall message is that if authorities follow procedures, stick to the law and act in a transparent manner, that credibility can hold firm, institutions can remain and structures can survive and democracy can continue to flourish. So
right,
let's hope for that.
Right, hopefully, of course. Melanie, beyond politics, there was a rather shocking incident here in the capital city about a drug scheme targeting teenagers. Now, for the sake of our viewers overseas who may not be familiar with this incident, please tell us a bit about it. And also, speaking within your capacity as a foreign journalist, what are your thoughts regarding Korea's fight against drugs?
Yes, so it is known that at least 4 people, and the reason why I say at least is because it is believed that it might be part of a bigger scheme. But at least 4 people have been trying to promote drinks to young students in the Gangnam area, which is a more posh part of Seoul. And these people have been offering free drinks to the students, telling the students that it will improve their concentration skills. And it seems later that in these drinks there were drugs. It was including ecstasy. And some of the students have been taking and consuming these drinks. And as a part of the promotion, the students had to write the phone number of their parents. And later, these people who have been promoting the drinks have been actually calling the parents and trying to blackmail some of them by telling them to pay them money, or they will say that their students are on drugs and report that to the police. Now, the 4 people who we know have been promoting these drinks, they are all saying that they promoted the drinks without knowing that there was actually drugs inside of the drinks, but that they merely had seen this job offer of a very high-paid part-time job promoting drinks in the Gangnam area, and that they therefore took it. And now the police is taking this very serious. They have already located and found all 4 people, and they will now have more policemen patrolling these education institutions in the more educational areas like Gangnam. And what I think about Korea's law on drugs and the fight against drugs is that generally, compared to a lot of other countries, Korea is doing a good job, I would say. if we look at, for example, compare Korea to the United States, which has a very big drug problem, we don't see drugs as much in Korea, neither in the nightlife, just as when you walk around on the streets. You very rarely encounter people who are, at least who appear to have been taking drugs.
Right, hopefully, and we'll continue not to see such people on the streets of Korea. Jacko, also within the academic arena, there have been some foreign media coverage about Korea's call for long-term grave consequences against school bullies. Could you tell us a bit about that, and how do such efforts compare to those elsewhere?
Yes, as those who have seen the recently popular Netflix drama series The Glory, in which a woman gets revenge on those who bullied her at school years previously, they'll know that bullying is both a chronic and acute problem in Korean schools. Now the People's Party Power, which is aligned with President Yoon Suk-yeol, they want to make a new law which would make Korean universities look at the high school records of applicants to see whether or not they were bullies during their high school days, to decide whether or not they should come to that university. And the length of time in which these disciplinary records would be kept may also be extended so that potential employers years down the track can look back and see if their job applicants were bullies at school. So this is not yet fixed, whether it's going to happen. At the moment, it's a proposal based on some public consultation that the People's Power Party has done recently. They still have to have a consultative meeting with Prime Minister Han Duck-soo to decide whether or not that will go ahead. But as well as that, there's also some measures, not just targeting the bullies themselves, but there's some measures that are proposed to increase the number of places where students who are victims of bullying can get help, by making more medical centres that specialise in bullying-related injuries and also self-harm and suicidal ideation, by making more of them available. So I think that Korea will probably need to have a discussion about how long these records should be kept, and because these are things that are done when children are minors, and generally in most societies we make a distinction between something that somebody does as a minor and what they do as an adult, and we try not to let those records carry on too far. So I'm not sure whether this is a good idea in the long term, but it remains to be seen.
Right, it does remain to be seen. Meanwhile, Melanie, I understand there's also been quite a bit of coverage about crypto fugitive Kwon Do-hyung, better known as Do Kwon, overseas, having no discernible property here in South Korea. What are the implications of such coverage?
Yes, so first of all, I would like to say about Do Kwon that he is known for having two failed cryptocurrencies behind him, and this cryptocurrency business has earned him around $315 million US. So it's quite a lot of money that he has gained from establishing cryptocurrencies and later on deciding to make them go bankrupt. So Do Kwon, he has been well, the governments in Singapore and in South Korea, as well as the United States, are looking for Do Kwon, and he has now been arrested in Montenegro. And both the United States and South Korea has asked to have him taken to South Korea and the United States. However, this new report showing that he has none of the money that he has gained from the cryptocurrencies appear to be in South Korea might make it more difficult for the South Korean authorities to actually get Do Kwon into the country. And another contributing factor is that his co-worker, you might say, Daniel Shin, who has been working with him and also made money from these cryptocurrencies. It has not yet been possible for the police to get his arrest warrant, which might also prove that it can be possible, very difficult for the police to actually get Do Kwon to South Korea.
Right, unfortunately for those who have suffered losses, of course. Now, on issues involving North Korea, Jacko, the regime this past weekend claimed to have successfully conducted yet another underwater nuclear drone test. Based on your own coverage of North Korea-related issues, Jacko, how probable is this particular claim, and what are its implications?
Yes, actually, my colleagues and I talked about this on our most recent NK News podcast, released tomorrow. North Korea says that it's working on this underwater attack drone for more than a decade, and it says that it will deter all sorts of military activity by the enemy, meaning South Korea and the United States. Now, it seems in the last 3 weeks there have been at least 3 tests of at least 2 different forms of unmanned underwater vehicle or drone. And in this most recent test, the one which was announced in the Rodong Shinmun paper on Saturday, this drone is said to have swum for 71 hours, travelling about 1,000 kilometres. Now, North Korea also claims that it successfully detonated a trial warhead, and exactly what that means we cannot say. It's a bit too early to detect, but it doesn't seem that North Korea actually tested anything nuclear under the water, which is a good thing, although North Korea did originally claim that this underwater vehicle could unleash a, quote, radioactive tsunami against coastal targets. Now, this weapon is intended to give North Korea what they call a second strike capability. So if North Korean land is hit by a nuclear weapon, that one of these underwater unmanned drones would be able to strike back against whoever and get revenge. And that's supposed to be a deterrent against any moves against North Korea. But whether it's actually realistic, well, Ankit Panda, an American analyst of weapons systems and their capabilities, he wrote for NK Pro that the capabilities and the level of completeness seem to be exaggerated, and it will probably remain a niche undertaking. And for example, anything that's underwater would be vulnerable to already existing anti-submarine technology. So whether it's manned or unmanned won't really make much difference. And both the United States and South Korea, and also Japan, have underwater weapons that can attack submarines. So it's vulnerable to those. And as to this claim of there being an underwater or radioactive tsunami, if there were something radioactive blown up under the water, radiation would spread, but not in a tsunami form. So that's a clearly overblown claim there. So in terms of delivering a nuclear weapon to its neighbours, it does remain that the ballistic missiles are the best way to go, and that's probably what North Korea is going to remain focusing on for the near future.
Right, and in the meantime, South Korea, Melanie, for its part, has publicly denounced North Korea's flagrant violations of human rights, and this denunciation was shared by Reuters. What do you suppose is the purpose of Seoul's recent public display of Pyongyang's abuses?
Well, I think this specific denunciation might be a little bit symbolical in the way that South Korea, as well as the United States, are right now doing these shared army drills, which has very much angered North Korea. And right now we see these rising tensions on the Korean peninsula that might be even rising more with this denunciation. At the same time, we've seen during the Easter that Japan and the United States and South Korea has made this statement about North Korean cyber crimes and a North Korean hacker corps, which is all, I think, part of the rising tensions that we see on the Korean peninsula, that North Korea is angry about the shared military drills and is already saying that South Korea and the United States are pushing the limit to nuclear war. And this has the denunciation as well as a statement about the cyber crimes might be a way of South Korea to respond to the many threats and the many very angry political statements coming from North Korea right now.
Right. On a light note, Jaco, the International Exposition delegation was recently in Busan to assess the city's prospects of hosting the 2030 World Expo. That being said, first of all, have you been to Busan, Jaco, of course?
Not for some years, but I have been to Busan several times, but gosh, it's been a while. I think before the pandemic.
Actually, me too. No, I think I went there 2 years ago, right? Well, anyways, what do you believe would be, Jaco, the diplomatic gains of Busan hosting the World Expo for South Korea as a country?
It's a good question. It remains a little bit unclear to me. I mean, you'll remember that the World Expo was last held in South Korea just 11 years ago in 2012 in Yeosu. Since then, there have only been 3 more expos anywhere in the world. There was the 2015 one in Milan, Italy, the 2017 one in Astana, Kazakhstan, and then there was one slated for 2020 in Dubai, but it was actually held in 2021 and 2022 because of the pandemic. So I don't know why Korea is so anxious to get it again, and not just in Korea, but another city on the south coast. I mean, Yeosu is on the south, so is Busan. For Busan, it's a different matter. I can understand why Busan wants to have it, because it wants to raise its standing internationally as a world-class port and a world-class city, and to show off its high-tech, futuristic stuff. But I don't really know how much attention the people of the world or companies pay anymore to giant World Expos. It seems almost like something of the past a little bit, particularly in the era of high-speed internet. You could just watch everything rather than having to travel everywhere. But World Expos are in the same league as other world events like the Olympic Games, the World Cup, the Asia Games, and even hosting a United Nations office. So we know that South Korea likes to host as many of these as possible because it shows off the nation's prowess and capabilities as a host and an organizer, and also as a lead or model nation. And in terms of that, Busan wants to be the first World Expo that has climate change as one of its major or sub-themes, and so that's important. In fact, the theme title is Transforming Our World, Navigating Towards a Better Future. And Korea plans to financially support developing nations to participate in this expo. But yeah, Korea's first time to host an expo was back in 1993, 30 years ago this year, in Daejeon. I did not go to that. Did you? Were you alive then? I'm not sure. Anyway, who really remembers the 1993 Daejeon World Expo? Who talks about it now? And same with the 2012 World Expo. Did it bring in lots of money? Did it pay for itself? I don't know. I really can't find profit or loss statements on these types of world events, but it's hard to measure. I wish Busan all the best, and I hope if it does win, that it ends up being a great success.
Right. Well, I've thought about it. I think I was abroad in the year 1993. Melanie, on a personal level, what are your thoughts with regard to Busan's prospects of winning the bid to host the World Expo in the year 2030?
It's hard to say. I have been participating in some of the press tours promoting the expo, and I definitely can say that there is a lot of planning in motion right now. However, as far as I remember, the next expo will be in Osaka in Japan in 2025. And I think the prospect of having two World Expos in two East Asian cities, which are both harbor cities and are a little bit similar in culture and taste. They're both known for seafood and such, might be a little bit difficult. I think if South Korea really wants to host a big world event, maybe they should try with the Olympics instead, because it seems like there are not many bidders for that.
Right, for the Olympics, I see. All right, well, on that note, I suppose we'll end. Melanie, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
And Jaco, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of Issues and Insiders. We return same time tomorrow. That is Tuesday, with a look back in history, that is, at Korea's fight for independence. Join us then.